We are live. Welcome back to the Financial Beast podcast. This is where we show practice owners how to harness the power of their practice, build wealth, and go out at the top of their game. I'm your host, your BFFF, best financial friend forever, Eric Miller. And I'm really excited about today's show because this is an area that I think a lot of people seem to overlook. And the area I'm talking about is their planning for what happens to them when they die or become incapacitated, and then the protection of their assets. So, of course, we're talking about estate planning and asset protection. And to help us kind of like understand this area, I'm going to bring on someone that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. He's been my attorney now for, I don't know, seems like about 9 or 10 years. He's helped a number of our clients with their estate plan and business transactions and a host of other things. And he's a wealth of knowledge. Mr. Patrick O'Connor from Clearwater, Florida. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Looking forward.
Yes. So, okay. So now when we start bringing people on to onboard them with our financial planning services, one of the areas that they tend to like flunk on is preparation for, like estate planning documents or having anything done in that area at all. I kind of find it funny why that is. And I think it's probably just because people don't want to confront this kind of thing, like confronting like what happens to me if I die, or, there's probably some fear along with that. But why don't you kind of give us what your viewpoint is of estate planning and, your process for, when you meet with someone.
All right. And a lot of times it's just pure procrastination. People get
I don't want to say that, but laziness comes into the fray. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I got something else better to do, wash my hair or whatever. But no, let's talk about the 4 ways that you can basically get rid of your estate. And the first way is by doing nothing, which is about 90% of the time when I sit down with somebody, they've never really done any estate planning or anything. And when you do nothing and you die without any documents, that's called dying intestate, which is a fancy way of saying I've died without a will. And when you die intestate, basically what happens is the court will write a will for you based on what the law says. The court will also appoint somebody to be in charge of your estate that they feel that needs to be in charge of your estate. You have no say-so in it. And then they'll also do this thing called probate. And probate is where your assets get tied up in a court process and administered by the court for maybe 9, 10, 12 months or longer. And then on top of that, because you're in court, you have to hire an attorney, because that's what attorneys do, is they go to court. And the probate costs can run anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6% of whatever goes through the probate estate. So in other words, yeah, I know, exactly. It's great for attorneys, though. Don't get me wrong.
I was going to say, I mean, people don't think that doesn't sound like that's much, but then you do that on like a $5 million estate, and you're like, oh wow,
you're talking a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
So when you die without a will, you're basically saying, court, I'm not making any choices. I want this person in a robe to make all the decisions for me. This person who I've never met before is now in charge of my final disposition of assets. So dying without a will is called dying intestate. The second way of getting rid of your estate is dying testate, which is a fancy way of saying I have a will. And a will is nothing more than a written document that says who's going to get your estate, who's in charge of your estate, and this document can be amended or revoked at any time prior to your death or incapacity. You're at least now making choices as to what you want. This is who I want to have receive my things. This is how I want them to receive things. In Florida, for example, you can even put language in there that who's going to be in charge of your children if they're under the age of 18. But we're still in probate court.
Quick question on that though, Patrick. If you die intestate and you have minor kids,
the court makes the decision as to who raises the kids.
That's no good.
And that's a great question. And a lot of times it's really funny, when people sort of come out of the woodwork when there's money involved. Because basically whoever raises the kids, they're going to get the benefit of whatever's in the estate to help pay for the kids, to raise them and put them through school and whatever else. So, dying without a will, intestate. Dying with a will, testate. Both go through probate. Both require attorneys. Both cost anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6%. Right? So do the math. If it's $1 million, it could be 30, 40, 50,000. If it's $2 million, it's double that. If it's $3 million, it's triple that. So it can get very expensive very fast. And it's not hard to hit $1 million these days, because if somebody has like a life insurance policy or something like that, $1 million life insurance policy isn't out of the realm. So how do we start to move away from the probate courts, and how do we have even more control? And there's 2 ways. One is with what's called a trust. Revocable trust, revocable living trust, revocable, just straight living trust. They're all the same thing. It's just different names for the same type of document.
Why do they have so many different names for the same thing?
Marketing.
Okay.
Just marketing. But what is a trust? A trust is a written document that says who's going to get your estate and who's in charge of your estate, that you can amend or revoke at any time prior to death or incapacity, which sounds just like a will. A will is the same thing, except with a trust, what I do is I put magic language in this document, and it transforms that document and makes it something different than a will. And by putting that magic language in this document that we call a trust, I've now removed you from the probate court. And why is that important? First of all, we avoid probate. We don't have to pay attorneys the 3, 4, 5, 6%. So you save money. That means more money is going to your kids or whoever. But also, here's another important factor. Whatever goes through the court system, I don't care if it's probate court, traffic court, criminal court, civil court, whatever court, is a matter of public record. So anybody can go down to the courthouse, pull your probate file, and see what's going on. Because the trust isn't filed with the court and doesn't go through probate, guess what you have? You have this thing called privacy.
Oh, boy.
Yes. And today, with all the hackers and scammers and nut jobs that are out there, that's an important consideration. So you get basically a double benefit. You get to be outside the probate court, but you also get this thing called privacy. So the third way of getting rid of our estate is with a trust. So intestate, no will, testate, will, trust is the third way. The fourth way of getting rid of our estate, and we use this in conjunction with the trust, is we use beneficiary and right of survivorship designations. For example, if you had a life insurance policy or an annuity or a brokerage account, you can designate a beneficiary. On a life insurance policy, usually what you want to do is designate the spouse as first beneficiary. The second beneficiary can be the trust. All right?
Yeah.
So see how it comes together. So we want to make sure, usually, in most cases, not always, but most, probably 95% of the time, the spouse is the primary beneficiary and the trust is the second beneficiary. If it's a joint account, it's automatically going to go to the surviving spouse. So what we would do in that case is we would name the trust as the primary beneficiary. Why? Because the spouse is already going to get it because it's a joint account. And here in Florida, we have special kinds of joint accounts for husbands and wives. We have this thing called joint tenant by the entirety, which is a special designation between husbands and wives that provides for right of survivorship. Some states have this, most states do not. Florida happens to be one of those states that have it. Now, what's also nice about the joint tenant by the entirety ownership? And basically, you use this like on brokerage accounts or bank accounts or savings accounts, CDs, those types of things. But let's just say, Eric, you're in an automobile accident and you hit me. And you're having a bad day because you hit an attorney. And what do attorneys do? They sue people. So I get a judgment against you because you really hurt me bad and it goes past your insurance limits. If you don't have your assets set up a certain way between you and your wife, let's say you just have a joint account or you have an account that doesn't necessarily reference your wife, I can now go after your assets, right? However, if you had a bank account or a brokerage account between you and your wife that says joint tenant by the entirety on it, if I sue just you, I can't attach that account here in Florida. So it's creditor protected as long as you're both alive and both married to each other.
Right.
But here's how I can go after that account if I need to. Let's say that, take the same scenario. You hit me in the car. I sue you. Why? You hit me. That's easy. However, the car is in joint names with you and your wife. I can now sue you because you're the driver, but I can also sue her because she's on the automobile. So the moral of the story is don't own your cars jointly. Whatever car you drive primarily should be in your name and vice versa. Now, here's something that you should also consider, because this is all risk management stuff.
Right.
If, however, you're driving your wife's car, and sometimes I drive my wife's car. I mean, I took it the other day to go get an oil change because she doesn't like going to garages and stuff. You want to make sure that you have what's called an umbrella policy or an excess liability policy. And what is that? That's an insurance policy that sits on top of your regular coverage. And it's actually the cheapest form of liability insurance known to man. For whatever reasons, insurance companies basically sell these things for, I think, next to nothing.
Yeah.
My minimum recommendation is a $2 million umbrella policy. That might cost you $600, $700, $800 a year. Think about that. You're getting $2 million worth of coverage for maybe $600 or $700 a year. That's almost unheard of. And when you do that, you also want to make sure that you look at your uninsured motorist, because sometimes you can increase your uninsured motorist coverage through the umbrella policy, and it might not cost you much of anything. And why do you want to have uninsured motorists? Here in Florida, 45% of the people that are out there driving are either underinsured or have no insurance at all.
Wow, 45%?
45%. It's insane. And what I mean by underinsured, you're only required to have $10,000 worth of insurance here in Florida to be able to drive.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to basically, insure against the other guy, because if you're hit, or let's say you have a teenage child that's hit, and the person that hit them doesn't have insurance. By having that uninsured motorist and increasing it under your umbrella policy, you can now sue your insurance company for any damages or injuries that you incur. So, again, look at that and try to tie that in with your umbrella coverage. Sometimes the umbrella coverage will allow you to do that depending on the company. Sometimes you have to maybe do something a little bit different with your underlying coverage. But again, take a look at the uninsured motorist, because this is all, estate planning is more than just, what happens to my stuff when I'm dead.
Right.
It's also how we protect what we have while we're alive, so that we have something to give away after we've passed away.
Absolutely.
So it's about protecting what we have, and then making sure that it goes to the people that we want it to go to after we die, with as little cost as possible and as easily as possible. So, umbrella policy, $2 million minimum. If you can afford more, get more. Other assets in Florida that are protected, by the way, I'll just go down the list.
Can I ask a question on the umbrella really quick? What else does that cover? What exactly does that umbrella policy? Because it says umbrella. So, okay, I'm thinking if I get in a car accident, there would be that would cover damages because of that. I know that, I guess, if you had a party at your house and somebody, sued you if event happened, but like what else does it cover? Like,
great question. It covers a lot. It covers your house. If you've got an RV, it could cover your RV. If you've got a boat, it could cover your boat. If you've got a motorcycle, it could cover your motorcycle.
Okay.
It covers, obviously, your cars. It can cover a lot of things. The term umbrella, think of it as sort of an all-inclusive type of thing. It covers over you. So it covers other things. And it can even cover rental properties or second homes that you might have in your individual name.
Oh, wow. It can do that then.
Yes. But then again, it depends on the carrier. Some carriers have certain limitations. Like, for example, I know of one carrier that won't cover boats, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I know of other carriers that will. Just depends. So you need to sort of ask your insurance agent, what does this cover? And where do you get an umbrella policy? Talk to the person that's insuring your car. Talk to the person that's insuring your home. That's usually where you start.
Yes. Quick question.
Sure.
If you have a trust, Do you need a will still?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Great question again. What's going on here?
I know, man. You think I've done this for a living for?
Yeah, I know. Yes, you do. Just
Okay.
because you have a trust. See, and I'm going to sort of get around to answering your question, and this is why. The trust offers no asset protection. So
Right.
you have to think of the trust as an empty bucket that we fill up when you die, and we do that with beneficiary designations. Okay. Now let's just say that for whatever reason you forgot to designate the trust as a beneficiary on an account or an insurance policy. The trust is that safety net that says, gee whiz, if I forgot to designate my trust as a beneficiary, the will catch that asset and pour it into the trust. And a lot of times the wills, in my line of work, we attorneys, we refer to it as a pour over will. It pours over into the trust. But remember this, whatever goes through the will goes through the probate courts, and therefore it'll eventually work its way into the trust, but it has to go through probate.
Gotcha. Okay. So it does help safeguard, things that you forget to designate, but it's necessary to have.
Yeah. Whenever we do a trust, we always do the pour over will, just because you got to have it there just in case.
What are some other basic documents then that people should be getting at the same time they get their will and their trust?
Other documents that you should get. In Florida, if you have a minor child, what you want to have is what's called a pre-need guardian form, which you're allowed to designate somebody that's going to be guardian of your child, God forbid, if something happens to you and the spouse. So that's one document. Another document that you want to have is what's called a durable power of attorney. And what a durable power of attorney is you appoint somebody to handle your financial affairs, pay your bills, sign your tax returns, represent you in front of governmental entities, and so forth. And then the next document you want to have is what's called a healthcare surrogate or a medical power of attorney. And our healthcare surrogate allows somebody to make medical decisions, get your medical records, because you have all these privacy acts and rules and so forth on the medical side. But it also allows somebody to make the decision for you to pull the plug. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Let's just say that you have a son or a daughter that's graduating high school and they're going to go off to college and they're now 18. You need to make sure that they have a durable power of attorney and a healthcare surrogate, because once they go off to college and once they're 18, they're emancipated, which is a fancy way of saying they're now an adult, which is sort of silly to think that an 18-year-old's an adult, but it is what it is.
Right.
Because the universities, if they have to go into the infirmary or whatever, they won't talk to you. The infirmary won't talk to you. But by having those documents, you now have the legal authority to talk to the university, talk to the hospitals, make those medical decisions, and so forth. Plus, with the power of attorney, if you have that, you can also find out what your child's doing, get copies of his grades, and see what's going on.
Hey, that's important too. What happens if they don't have that? I mean, then who makes decisions for them at that point in time? If someone turns 18, because I'm sure this happens quite a bit.
Yeah,
right.
Then you're basically throwing yourself on the mercy of the court, literally.
Okay, so the court.
Well, not necessarily literally the court, but you're sort of trying to get somebody to be the Good Samaritan to discuss these things with you.
Yeah.
And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. And it can be a bit of a headache.
I believe it. Wow.
Yeah.
So kids.
We live in a world of privacy rules and this and that, and it's just easier to have these documents than not to have them.
Yes. So again, kids turning 18, definitely make sure that they have these documents in place.
Especially if they go off to school. But anybody over the age of 18 should have these documents.
Yeah.
And normally when they're 18, 19, or 20, they name the parents, mom and dad, to make those decisions for them. And that's a good thing.
Let's talk about business ownership, because a lot of people that are listening to this own their own business or own their own practice. And, it's been our contention that, this is a valuable investment, and, you have to make sure that it's protected. in a lot of states, the spouse cannot own let's say the practice of a healthcare practice. They're just not allowed to own it.
Right.
What are some things that people can do to protect the value of their business and not make it a problem for their spouse if they should die prematurely?
Wow. That is a complicated question, but let me break it down into different components. First, I'm going to make some assumptions. The first assumption I'm going to make is that you've got a practice, but you also have a partner. Okay, and let's just say that...
We'll say you have a partner, yeah.
You're 50-50. In that situation, what you need to have is what's called a buy-sell agreement. What is that? It's an agreement between the two partners that basically say if one of us dies or becomes disabled, that the other one can buy the other one out. So, for example, Eric, let's just say that you and I are 50-50 shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
All right? We get this buy-sell agreement. And in the buy-sell agreement, it talks about what the purchase price is going to be. So we have to agree on what the purchase price is going to be. And there's all sorts of different ways to calculate the purchase price or put it into some type of amount or determine an amount when that event happens. Then the next thing we have to do is we have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. All right? And the easiest and best way to pay for somebody when they die is with life insurance.
Right.
Because otherwise, if you don't have life insurance in place, what happens is that you have to pay it over time, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And that's a problem because let's just say that you and I are partners and you die. Notice how I'm still alive.
I noticed this, yes. It doesn't seem fair, but okay. We'll roll with it.
This is my story. But anyways, you die. And the reason we have this buy-sell agreement is because I really don't want to be partners with your wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was to ask your wife this question, would you rather have Eric's stock or $1 million? 99 times out of 100, she's going to say she wants the money.
Right.
So I have a life insurance policy on you. You have one on me. You die, so I get this $1 million. Now, this buy-sell agreement requires that I give your estate or your trust that $1 million. In exchange for that, I get your stock. Now I own the business and I can do whatever I want. Your wife's happy. Well, not really. You're dead, so she's somewhat not happy. But, she's got that $1 million to pay her expenses or do whatever.
Well, what if I just kept $1 million? What if you just kept $1 million and said, forget this buy-sell agreement, whatever it says? Like, is that legally binding? Is it like? Oh,
it's a very legally binding agreement. Now, but if somebody's going to be a thief, we have the court systems and so forth that sort of provide for that. So, in my 37 years of doing this, I haven't had anybody not make that payment.
Okay. So it's the probabilities are really low that it would happen.
Really low, but it could happen. But now, here's something to think about with regards to these buy-sell agreements. A lot of times, we'll set up a formula. Like, for example, we'll take, a percentage of gross. Like, we'll say, all right, the purchase price is 50% of gross revenue or 1.5 times gross revenue, whatever.
Right.
And let's just say that number today equals $1 million. All right, so the business is worth $2 million. Our business is worth $2 million, so my stock is worth $1 million. Your stock's worth $1 million. How much life insurance should you get? It's a trick question. You all know the answer to it.
I'll let you answer it then.
I always recommend that you buy more insurance than what you're going to need because the value of that business today might not be the value of that business 5 years from now because we're both hard workers. And let's say the business, instead of being worth $2 million, is now worth $4 million.
Right.
But let's just say in the interim, I had a heart attack or you had cancer and we can no longer buy insurance. Or let's just say that there's debt in the business. Or I've got to go out and hire somebody that can do what you did because I can't do my job and your job. So when you go out and you set up these buy-sell agreements and you get the life insurance, you always want to buy more life insurance than what you need today.
Yes, that's a good point.
Because if you don't, then you're having to pay that extra increase over time. All right? And you usually have as a fallback, at least in my buy-sell agreements, that if you don't have the insurance or the insurance lapses or if you don't have enough insurance, then we pay the rest of it over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And we tie it to a promissory note with an interest rate.
Right. So that, I got that. What if What if someone doesn't have a partner? Can they still do a buy-sell agreement?
Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer is, oh my gosh. The problem that people have that don't have partners and so forth is you got to have somebody that can come in and buy the business. Maybe sometimes there's a key employee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And maybe what we do is we have the key employee buy life insurance on the owner. Okay. But normally what we have to do in order for that to work is we bonus the key employee the premium money. So you're really paying for it. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is maybe you find a third party prior to your death and you exit out that way. That's the best way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work because you don't know when you're going to die.
True.
The other way of doing it is you can always take out, if you're insurable, and that's the key. If you're insurable, you get a life insurance policy on yourself. And when you die, the stock goes to your wife or your spouse. And the spouse does whatever he or she can to liquidate or sell it. But at least you're compensating the spouse by getting that life insurance policy to pay them, to give them the liquidity to live their lives, pay their bills, and pay for college or whatever for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But that's always the harder situation, is where you don't have a partner and you really don't have any other way of basically selling the business. Because the problem you've got with that scenario is that the day before you die, the value of your business is here. Okay.
Right.
The day that you die, if you don't have a way of selling it, it does this. Boom. It just drops off the table. The value of the business basically becomes the liquidated value, and you're basically selling the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, because that's about it. And you're pulling whatever cash is out of the bank, accounts receivable, and the business usually closes its doors.
And I don't think that's what most owners think about, is like for most people, the values of their businesses are going to drop tremendously the day that they're not there anymore. So you can either make sure that you have like from what I hear, what you're saying, like in addition, making sure you have enough life insurance that would cover the income replacement and also enough to cover what the value of the business would have been the day before you died. So it means having a lot of life insurance, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean,
if you don't want to go the buy sell route,
right? Life insurance in those situations is a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking from a legal perspective. I do not sell the stuff. I just see the aftermath, and I see what works and what doesn't work. And life insurance makes everything in that situation work beautifully. Because here I want to talk about a tax loophole real quick, and your business owners are going to love this. And it ties in with a buy-sell agreement. I'm getting excited here. Okay?
I can tell. Tell me.
It's a tax loophole.
Anytime you say tax loophole, my antenna is going up right now. So I love it.
Well, let's just take you and I, that buy-sell thing. Okay. I'm a 50% holder, 50% shareholder. You're a 50% shareholder. You die. That $1 million life insurance policy comes to me. So I've got $1 million, and guess what? It's tax-free.
Mm-hmm.
Now I buy your stock for $1 million. All right. I now have what's called a $1 million basis in your stock. So if I go out and sell that business tomorrow, that first $1 million that I get for that business is tax-free.
Right.
Whereas maybe before you died, if we went out and sold that business, I'd have to pay tax on that $1 million. So I get this $1 million tax-free. Great. I then buy your stock for $1 million. I have what's called basis. So if I go sell that stock for $1 million the next day, I don't have any gain. So I've made $1 million and I've paid no taxes.
Even better.
How great is that?
Even
so
better.
I mean, it's truly a tax loophole. It's great. Now the problem with not having life insurance with a buy sell. Let's just say that you and I have a buy sell, but we didn't go get life insurance, but I have to pay you out over a 10-year period of time.
Yep.
Now, I'm having to pay you with after-tax dollars because I'm having to pull money out of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically being taxed. I have to pay FICA tax on it. I got to pay income tax on it. And then I give it to you. So I've now paid by the time you add FICA and ordinary income tax, I've maybe paid 40 cents on the dollar, 45, 50 cents on the dollar to do that. Whereas if I had life insurance, I didn't have to do it. And then on top of it, let's just say that we didn't have life insurance and I had to pay you out over a 10-year period of time. But what if after 3 years I died? Or I just can't run the business because you were the brains of the operation. I was just showing up collecting the check. Well, now your wife and kids, guess what they get?
They're stuck with that debt, right?
Promissory note that they can put on the wall as wallpaper that they can't collect on. All right? So that's another reason to do it. And when I sit down with business owners all the time, let's just take the scenario that your stock is worth $1 million. Right. Well, let's just say in the buy-sell agreement, I'd have to pay it out over 10 years. So it's $100,000 a year that I'm having to pay, plus interest. But let's just say that the life insurance on your life is $5,000 a year. What would you rather do? Would you rather want to pay $5,000 a year or $100,000 a year?
Right.
That's why you get the life insurance.
Yes, it really becomes a no-brainer. More that you're talking about this, the more that it's just like it makes almost zero sense not to have life insurance be the funding mechanism of these buy-sell agreements. It just solves so many problems fast. Oh,
it makes it just sing, buddy. I mean, that's the way you want to do it. I mean, it's just seamless. Boom, boom, boom. Everybody's happy except the dead guy because he's dead.
Yeah. How many of the business owners that you work with, how many would you say are like, don't have the buy-sell agreement in place? I mean, is it
a lot?
Is it like 80 to 90% of them that don't have something in place?
A lot. And the ones that do have it in place have it set up wrong. They have it set up as a redemption agreement. What I've been talking about is what's called a cross purchase, where I own life insurance on you, you own life insurance on me.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we do that is because anything that's inside the company is subject to the company's creditors. And a lot of times when I sit down with people and they say, oh yeah, I've got a buy-sell agreement, here it is. Well, who owns the life insurance? Oh, the company does. Oh, really? All right. So you set it up as what's called a redemption agreement. So when you die, the company buys your stock back. Well, that's right. Well, guess what you don't get?
Step up in basis.
Yeah. And then if the money comes into the company and the company has creditors, now what? Let's say you've got loans. Maybe maybe you have a company that has trucks out on the road and the truck got in an accident and therefore the cash assets inside the company are frozen because if you pay that out, it could be a fraudulent conveyance with respect to creditors. So when you do these buy-sell agreements, you've got to know what you're doing. You need to set it up a certain way, and you want to make sure it's what's called a cross purchase, where I buy your stock individually, not the company, but I buy your stock individually. So we get all these benefits. So there's methods to the madness.
Yeah, I get it. Hey, when it comes to like business documents, because we have members agreement and operating agreements and I learned a lot of that from you and make sure you have these things in place, because if you don't, and you never know what's going to happen when you have partners. And if you don't have it in writing, it's really not true. How important is it? How often should people like review their operating agreements and member agreements and those things, assuming that it's been a while, and like kind of talk about the importance of those documents?
Great question.
Boy, I'm firing questions today.
You are batting 1,000. Let me talk about that. In Florida, LLCs aren't required to have operating agreements or minutes. All right, Fine. That's wrong. You should always have operating agreements. You should always have minutes. And here's why.
And what's a minute? To kind of define that so people
annual
understand.
Minutes, where you elect officers or managers in an LLC and you approve and ratify prior acts. But more importantly, in the operating agreement, and you want to have, in an LLC, they're called membership units or certificates. But I just refer to it as stock because it actually looks like a stock certificate. You remember that beneficiary thing that I was talking about with regards to having it go into the trust at the beginning of our conversation? This is why you want to have an operating agreement. This is why you want to have a corporate book. which holds the operating agreement, the stock certificates in it, and this is why you want to have minutes. You want to make sure that your operating agreement has special magic language in it that says, hey, look, when I die, I can designate beneficiaries on my ownership in this LLC. Okay. And on your minutes, you want to have that in the minutes also, that when I die, my stock goes into my trust. And then on your stock certificates, you want to make sure that it has what we refer to in Florida as TOD designation, transfer on death. But more importantly, a lot of times, if you're able to do it, you want to have your spouse on there as joint tenant by the entirety. So that way, when one spouse dies, it automatically goes to the surviving spouse, right? So we don't have probate there. And then we have this transfer on death designation with the stock certificates. So that way, when both of you are gone, it automatically transfers in the trust, avoiding probate again, right? So we want to make sure you have that documentation in place, because it's all about documentation. Because if you don't have that, then you're probating, guess what? The LLC.
Yeah.
Which is the business, which in a lot of cases, in what I normally find with business owners, the largest asset on their personal financial statement is their business.
Right.
And a lot of times, they don't think about that. Like, all right, what do I do with that? And how do I get it transitioned into my estate planning documents? And how do I do this? And remember this. The trust offers no asset protection.
And when you say a trust offers no asset protection, you basically are saying that money inside that trust, just because because I've heard a lot of people say, well, I have money in trust and it's protected. And I'm like,
no.
Okay.
In a revocable living trust, and I want to make sure we understand, in a revocable living trust offers no asset protection. Because, like in Florida, we have that joint tenant by the entirety thing that we discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If you have joint tenant by the entirety, it's protected. If you put that asset into a joint trust, it's no longer protected and subject to your creditors. So again, that empty bucket thing. We want to make sure the trust is the empty bucket that gets filled up when both spouses die. So you never really want to put assets into the trust. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making all the time. And when I sit down with people that have their estate planning documents, they go, oh, yeah, I got my trust. I got this. I got that. I go, great. How about your assets? Oh, yeah, I got my assets in there too. I go, okay. And did the person that you talked to about this, did they tell you that the trust offers no asset protection? Silence.
Right.
It's like, what? Well, yeah, if I sue you, I'm going to be able to go get your assets that are in your trust. How's that sound? Well, I don't like that. And then I have to walk them through the scenario as to why we don't do that. The trust is a tool that we have sitting on the sidelines. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it the right way, you fill it up when both of you are gone, avoiding probate, and then distributing it out based on what the trust says.
Now, you did mention the revocable trusts. I know that there are irrevocable trusts.
Yes, sir.
And those are, I think, if I understand what an irrevocable trust is basically where you are creating a trust now where you're giving up basic ownership of an asset when you put it into an irrevocable trust. So why would anybody do that?
Oh, there's all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
For example, life insurance. I keep going back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say you have somebody that's worth $30, $40 million. Because right now, the estate tax laws tax anything above $12,920,000 as of 2023. Mm-hmm. If you're married, you can double it. So figure first $26 million if you're married, no estate tax. The estate tax starts at 18, goes up to 40%, like that. So let's just say you have somebody that's worth $40 million. If they have a life insurance policy that they own in their name, they hold it, they own it, that death benefit is includable in the calculation of the estate tax. So what we do in that situation is when they go out and buy a life insurance policy, we usually have the irrevocable trust buy it.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So by doing it that way, it's not includable in their estate. It's, again, sitting on the sidelines, and when that person dies, there's money in that trust, usually to provide liquidity to the estate, to maybe pay the income tax or other things. So that's one way that we use irrevocable trust. Another way we use irrevocable trust is maybe sometimes somebody has a charitable intent. They want to leave money to a charity. And there's certain types of charitable irrevocable trust where you can put money into that trust, get a tax deduction for doing it, and get income for your lifetime. And then when you die, whatever's left in that trust goes to the charity. Those are called charitable remainder trusts. So irrevocable trusts have a purpose depending on what's needed. And there's just a slew of other irrevocable trusts. There's these things called SLATs, which are spousal trusts, that you can put money inside those things and benefit your spouse and kids, and again, move things out of your estate. And it's all for the purpose of reducing your estate tax and setting things up, but still receiving, income for a period of time.
Right. No, that totally makes sense.
Yes.
Where was I going next? I wanted to talk about, I think we kind of touched on the estate tax. This is something that comes up all the time. And you had just mentioned right now, you really have to have an estate that's in excess of basically $26 million for you to be impacted on that. Now, I know that does vacillate, from administration to administration. And I don't know the last time it was, $1 million or $5 million. What would you say to people now that maybe have like a net worth of like 20 or $30 million and maybe you're only like 40 or 50 years old, so they have time for that to grow? And you'd mentioned some of those spousal lifetime, like what are some things that you would do right now when it comes to making adjustments or being proactive if they should lower the estate tax down?
Okay, and let's talk about that lowering first.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's $12,920,000 per person. Every year, it gets indexed and goes up. Next year is probably going to go up $500,000-$600,000 from where it is now. It's tied to the inflation rate, what have you. So let's say next year it's going to be $13,500, and let's say in 2025 it goes up another $500, so it's at $14,000. The problem we've got is that in 2026, the current act that was passed under President Trump in 2017 could go away unless Congress re-ups it. And if it goes away, the estate tax credit, this $12,920,000 today, gets cut in half.
Oh, wow.
So we could lose, if it's $14 million per person in 2025, if they don't re-up this law, in 2026 it's now $7 million. So instead of, spouses and husband and wives being able to shelter $28 million, they can only shelter $14.
Yeah.
So we're sort of watching what's going to happen next November. I've got a number of high net worth clients that want to do something, but we're sort of not really doing anything right now because they want to take advantage of whatever the credit is, but they don't want to give up control and they don't want to give things away because they like having control and not giving things away at the current time. But if it makes sense from an estate tax standpoint, they're willing to do it, but they want to sort of take a wait and see approach. So I figure that probably in 2025, both of us are probably going to be very busy depending on what happens in the election.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, because if it does get cut in half, then, 14 million is, still a lot, but now it starts to make, it cuts into a number of people, especially if they have a high, $20 million net worth.
Well, what's 40% of $14 million? About $5 or $6 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So that's what you're staring at in taxes.
Yeah. Let's talk about, you do also like business sales too. And I know that that's another area that's happened quite a bit. I'm sure you've probably been pretty busy the last 3 or 4 years of people selling their business. Mm-hmm. What are some basic, documents and things that you got to make sure that you're looking out for when it comes to the sale of your business?
Well, usually when you sell your business, it usually starts out with a letter of intent, which is a non-binding offer, which basically says we're going to pay you. Let's say we were going to sell our business for $2 million.
Right.
So we get this letter of intent, and they say, all right, we'll give you $2 million. How you get paid that, you really need to sort of take a look at. Sometimes it's all cash. Sometimes it's some seller financing. Sometimes they throw stock in. Mm-hmm. So you really got to take a close look at that, because at the end of the day, how much money I put in my pocket is important, and how they want to structure that can be taxed 100 different ways. Okay, mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that you understand that. Other things that are very common in a sale of a business is they want the seller to sign non-competes. right? I
Right.
don't want to buy your business and you go open up shop across the street. So there's going to be a non-compete that's going to be involved. There's going to be, once the letter of intent's agreed on, they're going to do a due diligence. And once their due diligence is complete, then they're going to give you what's called a purchase agreement, whether it's a stock purchase or an asset purchase agreement. And you really got to be careful when it comes to that, because the devil's in the details sometimes. And with regards to a sale agreement, they're going to want the seller to make all these representations and warranties about a whole bunch of things. That the financial documents you gave them are true and correct, that the tax returns are true and correct, that there's no litigation issues, that your contracts that you've got are valid. I mean, the representations go on and on and on. There could be 20, 30 different individual representations you have to make, and then you always have to attach documents to sort of back those things up. And so there's, depending on the size of the purchase, it could be very document intensive.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to make sure that the documents that you attach to support each and every representation are spot on, because if they're not, and let's say the buyer after a year, they don't run the business the way that you do, and they run it into the ground, they go, holy smokes, Pat and Eric, they lied to us. We're going to sue them because of all these fraudulent misrepresentations.
Yes.
You never want to be in a lawsuit where you hear fraudulent misrepresentations.
That just sounds bad right there.
Yeah, it's bad on so many levels, Eric.
Wow. So it's like when you're reviewing a purchase agreement then, and someone would have all these things that you have to represent. Is that where you kind of like say, okay, yes, no, yes. Did you try to narrow that list down, or
well, no, we don't
change
try
the
to
language?
narrow the list. We try to include as many documents on there as possible so they can't say that we hid anything.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah.
And so usually you're setting up, like a Dropbox online or whatever, and you're just dropping all sorts of documents. But you have to sort of make sure that you identify each document with each rep or warranty.
Right.
There's a lot of work to it, is what I'm trying to say. And then, when you get to the closing, sometimes there's promissory notes and security agreements and, bills of sale and minutes and resolutions and a whole myriad of things.
Yeah.
And you don't want to go in there by yourself, not knowing what you're doing, because, it's a world of specialization. This is what we do. And most people don't do this for a living, but we do.
Nope.
So just be careful and get an attorney involved very, very early at the letter of intent stage.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
There was another thing I was going to ask you about estate planning, and it just went away.
Well,
I hate
Eric,
when that happens. I don't know if that's a sign of getting old or what, but
it probably is. But
maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, here's the thing: you can always have you do another podcast with you.
Yes, that's for sure. We can do that. No, this has been awesome, man. I mean, we covered a ton of ground, but I think the basic of it is that, I know what I wanted to ask you. A big obstacle that a lot of people have when it comes to like naming like people. I mean, like a lot of people just are like, well, I don't trust my family. There's no one that I can like, that I would trust to oversee this or that. And like, how do you navigate that? And like, let's say someone does want to name a trustee, but they don't have anyone. Like what would their alternative be in that case?
Yeah, no, naming the trustee is an important decision. I refer to the trustee sometimes as the gatekeeper, because they're going to be making the distributions out. They're going to be making the investments with regards to whatever assets there are, or selling the assets. They're going to be in charge of having to get tax returns done. It's a job. And more times than not, people will pick family members, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, whatever. And in a small estate, maybe that's okay. But, you get somebody in there that doesn't do the right thing, and they like to steal money because they can from family members. And by the way, family members will steal from you faster than total strangers. Depending on the size of the estate, sometimes I recommend having a corporate trustee.
Mm-hmm.
A bank, a trust company, A lot of times your brokerage houses will have trust departments. And people ask me all the time, which corporate trustee or brokerage house has the best trust department? And I always say none of them do. They're all the same. Because one day somebody's at Bank of America, the next day they're at Raymond James, the next day they're who knows where. And they just sort of are there.
Float.
But the thing about having a corporate trustee, if you've got a large estate, is one, they've got the infrastructure to do those things.
Right.
And if they make a mistake, you have a deep pocket to go after. Whereas if you have Uncle Billy as your trustee and he screws it up and takes all the money, how deep are his pockets?
What does a corporate trustee usually charge as part of the estate? Is it just like a percent or two, or is it higher than that?
Yeah, it's a percent once they become trustees. So by naming them, it usually doesn't cost anything. And most corporate trustees have fee schedules. And it starts to drop down depending on the dollar amounts. If you've got $1 million, maybe it's 1%. If it's $3 million, it's maybe 0.75%. So they usually have a schedule. And you can always ask those corporate trustees for their fee schedule, and they'll provide it for you. But it's usually 1% plus or minus a quarter point either way per year.
Yeah.
Per year.
Good. Yeah, because that seems to come up quite a bit, especially with some people that just don't have anybody to name in their family. But that was awesome. Patrick, what states are you licensed to do what you do in?
Florida.
Yeah?
That's it, buddy.
Okay.
That's it. But, what I basically discussed today is probably relevant in more states than Florida, though.
Correct. And if someone wanted to get a hold of you, what would they do?
Well, they can call you.
They could call me. Yeah.
They could call you. Or they can call me at, I'll give you my phone number, 727-539-6800. That's 727-539-6800. Or you can email me at Pat, P-A-T, at yourpersonal.attorney.com. That's YOURPERSONAL, attorney, ATTORNEY.com.
Beautiful. This has been a very, very, very powerful hour. And I hope everyone listens to a lot of the things that Patrick said. A lot of these things I know seem complex, a lot of the terminology, but you guys have to be proactive when it comes to this area. Don't wait and make sure that you are taking action on this, because you don't want to. I'm sure you have some really horrible stories of families and estates that didn't have any documentation set up or anything set up, and how long that took to probably finally pan out, probably years in some cases.
Oh, we could do 3 podcasts on that. Yeah. But let me leave your viewers with this. If you don't do anything, then expect nothing. And if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. Think about it.
That's wise advice right there, coming from an attorney. So we love it. All right, Patrick, thanks so much. And we'll see everyone on the next podcast.
Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it. Talk to you later. All right. Bye-bye.